isn't buried, it's coded. Decode the strange. In the circuits of the unknown, where the logic breathes and the data flows, we question what the code has shown and spark the light when no one goes. Clearly learned voices collide.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to try a little mental exercise with me here. Picture the typical creator economy success story right now. You're scrolling through TikTok or YouTube, you see someone who made it big. They're usually chaotic, they're loud, maybe posting at 3 in the morning. There's probably some Twitter drama involved somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
We tend to associate independent media with a certain level of, let's call it amateur energy.
The move fast and break things model, or maybe more accurately in the creator space, it's move fast and burn out.
Yes, exactly. Now, I want you to look at the document we have on the desk today.
Okay.
It's titled Bald and Bonkers Network LLC Policies and Procedures, 2026 edition. And if you just glanced at the table of contents, you would swear you were looking at the compliance manual for, a mid-sized bank or a logistics firm.
It is visually jarring.
Yeah.
It really is. You've got this logo that just screams paranormal comedy. The name is Bald and Bonkers, after all.
Right.
But the text it's dense, it's legalistic, and unbelievably specific. I mean, it covers everything from artificial intelligence ethics all the way down to custodial chain of custody for data.
And that's the hook, isn't it? That's what we're looking at today. It's a collision of two worlds that, they usually don't even touch.
Not at all.
On one side, you have the paranormal, the weird, the bonkers stories that usually get sidelined. And on the other, a corporate governance structure that could honestly rival a Fortune 500 company. It's like finding a punk rock band that somehow has a better compliance department than a hedge fund.
That is a very, very apt analogy. And to really understand why this document even exists, we have to look at the founder, Dakota Franzen. Because this thing didn't just appear in a vacuum.
Right.
Franzen's background is, it's eclectic, to put it mildly. He's done film, he's done comic books, he's been in the music industry, video games.
So he's seen the mess.
He has seen the mess everywhere. The entire thesis of this document seems to be something like, the creative industry is often broken and exploitative. If we want to survive as independent creators, we have to be better at business than the businessmen.
Compliance buys freedom. That's a phrase that just kept popping into my head over and over as I was reading this.
It is a very 2026 concept, isn't it? We're seeing this shift where creators are finally realizing that, going viral isn't a business plan. It's not sustainable.
No.
This document, this is a business plan. It's a constitution for a media empire that, bizarrely, handles the supernatural with the seriousness of a heart surgeon.
And the mission statement, it explicitly says the goal is absolute authenticity. Now look, usually when I hear the word authenticity in a corporate mission statement, my eyes just glaze over.
Chuckles. Yeah, it usually means we hired a new PR firm.
Exactly. But here,
they operationalize it.
Yeah.
And that's the fundamental difference. They don't just say be authentic. They build an entire policy framework that forces transparency.
So it's not a feeling, it's a rule.
It is a rule. Whether it's admitting to a past gaming addiction, which we will definitely get to, or strictly disclosing every single use of AI, the authenticity isn't a vibe. It's a mandate.
And that mission description is really interesting too. To empower every individual globally to courageously share their unique, diverse, and unconventional stories. It specifically uses the word bonkers.
Which creates this fascinating paradox. How do you govern bonkers? If your entire brand is chaos or the supernatural or just the unexplained, how do you possibly put that into a spreadsheet?
That's the deep dive. That's what we're getting into. We're going to look at the whole ecosystem they've built, this incredibly dense AI policy, which I think is going to surprise a lot of people, and the human element, including a blacklist that sounds terrifying but might actually be, kind of genius.
And we can't ignore that create a life around your passion aspect. That's woven through the whole thing. The document isn't just about protecting the company from lawsuits. It's very clearly framed as a guide to help creators actually make a living.
Right. And it's a living document. That's what they call it. It's designed for public scrutiny. They've basically put their entire playbook online and said, here, judge us.
So let's do it.
Let's judge them. Let's start with Section 1, the ecosystem.
More than just a podcast network. That's the headline they use, and it's not an exaggeration.
Yeah, when I first heard network, I thought, okay, they've got, what, 5 podcasts and a Patreon, something like that.
Standard model.
The standard model. But looking at the source material, calling this just a podcast network is like calling a smartphone just a calculator. It's a massive oversimplification.
Completely. The document lays out a full multimedia enterprise. They've very deliberately positioned themselves as a hub for creative expression. It's not limited to audio at all.
So let's break down the arms of this octopus. First up, you've got Bonkers Books.
Yes, and it's a robust publishing arm. It's not an afterthought. They're talking hardback, ebook, white papers.
What's the focus?
It seems to be a mix. The document mentions investigative nonfiction, children's literature, and adult fantasy.
Okay, so I have to ask, why bother with books? In the age of TikTok, of short-form video, print just feels slow, doesn't it?
It does feel slow, but I think it's about credibility. A podcast episode is, by its nature, somewhat fleeting. A TikTok is gone in a flash. But a hardback book on a shelf has a sense of permanence. If you're trying to establish a brand that deals with the unconventional, having a physical artifact gives it weight. It moves the content from the realm of internet rumor into published work.
That makes a lot of sense. It anchors the digital ghost stories in the physical world.
Precisely.
Okay, and then there's the Network Academy. Now, this is the part that I think is really interesting for anyone listening who wants to actually do something like this, not just consume the content.
This is their educational platform. And you have to notice the tiered structure here. It's very clever. They have the free YouTube option. That's the top of their funnel.
Very democratic.
Very. But then they have the certification platform.
Where you can get a digital certificate for $5, $5 US.
That price point is fascinating to me.
It seems too low, doesn't it? If you're selling a course online, you see people charging $100, $200, $500. Why 5?
I think it goes back to that mission, democratization of storytelling. $5 is essentially a microtransaction. It's accessible to almost anyone on the planet, regardless of currency conversion rates. But, and this is the important part, it is not free.
It's skin in the game.
Exactly. If something's free, you might click through it, get distracted, and forget it. If you pay $5, even just 5, you are making a small psychological commitment. You're more likely to finish it.
And it adds a layer of legitimacy to the certificate without creating a real financial barrier to entry. It validates the learning process.
It does. And they're teaching digital era storytelling and monetization. They're basically training their own future competitors or maybe their future partners.
Future partners, I think. That seems to be the play here. And this connects to the broadcasting side of things, right? Bonkers TV Plus and the Bonkers Broadcasting Network, or BBN.
Yes. The text is clear that these are still in the planning stages, but the ambition behind them is huge.
They want to create a subscriber experience with minimal ads. I mean, that's the dream for any content consumer, right? No interruptions?
It's the holy grail. But look at BBN's stated role when it comes to third parties. The policy specifically mentions syndicating third-party creators and offering them professional tools.
So this is the Netflix for the weird strategy.
In a way, yes. Think about it. If you're an independent creator, you've just made a brilliant documentary about, say, cryptids in Appalachia.
Yeah.
What's your biggest problem?
Getting people to see it? Distribution.
Distribution.
Yeah.
You can put it on YouTube and just get completely lost in the algorithm. But if BBN exists as an aggregator, as a curated channel specifically for that kind of content, they suddenly become the platform of choice for an entire genre.
So they're not just making the content, they're building the pipes for it to flow through.
Precisely. It is a classic vertical integration strategy. You control the production with the books and the in-house studios, you control the education with the academy, and eventually you control the distribution with BBN.
Okay, let's talk about what they are airing right now, because the document goes into this strategic digital restructuring that happened in late 2025, early 2026.
Right. They basically took one big monolithic channel and split it into a bunch of specialized ones.
A classic maturity move for a media brand.
It is. You have to segment your audience. So the source lists the main channel, which is where all the legacy content lives. But now it's also the home for 2 specific flagship programs. You have Deep Dive AI, which we have to discuss in depth later, and These Stories of Mine.
These Stories of Mine sounds intense. The source material describes it as raw life discussions inspired by Franson's novel. It feels like that's the emotional anchor of the whole network.
I think it provides the gravity, yes. But then you have all these other channels. Sarah's Mystery Short, audiobook-style broadcasts by an assistant and singer named Sarah Larson. You have the Bald and Bonkers Film Library for full-length feature films, a music library.
For their in-house band, Starlight Amnesia?
Right. But I want to stop and look at the channel called Game Night.
Oh, Game Night. This is the one that made me just stop reading and stare at the page for a solid minute.
Because on the surface, it's just a gaming channel, right? Let's plays, reviews. Very standard YouTube fare.
Totally normal. But then you read the purpose, the rationale behind it.
Yes. It explicitly states in this corporate policy document that the channel serves as a personal accountability tool for the founder, Dakota Franson, to manage a past gaming addiction.
They use recording software timers to limit his playtime. It's written into the company rules.
It blew my mind. I mean, can you imagine reading the bylaws of General Motors and finding a clause that says, "We build fast cars to help the CEO get over his chronic need for speed"? It's so deeply personal.
It is. And it's risky, isn't it?
It's incredibly risky. Why do you think?
Well, because in any normal corporate culture, you hide your weaknesses. You don't broadcast that the CEO has an addiction issue in your public-facing policy document.
Absolutely not. But by putting it right there, out in the open, they're doing two very clever things. First, they're enforcing the mechanism. If it's in the policy, he has to follow the timer. It creates external pressure.
And second,
Second, it reinforces that absolute authenticity mission statement. It's the ultimate proof.
it tells the entire audience, look, we're not perfect. We are human beings working on our stuff just like you.
And notice that the policy says other employees are permitted to contribute content to the channel, but that core accountability function remains its primary directive.
It turns a potential liability and addiction into a company asset. It becomes content. It becomes a community connection point.
It's brilliant in a very strange way. It
Right.
really grounds the whole operation. It reminds you that this isn't some faceless corporation. It's just people trying to figure out life.
Well, speaking of things that are decidedly not people, we have to wade into the swamp now.
Oh.
Section 2, the AI revolution.
This is, and I'm not exaggerating, this is, in my opinion, the most intellectually honest and forward-thinking section of the entire document.
Intellectually honest is a strong phrase. Because usually when companies talk about AI in 2026, it feels like they're lying. Either they're trying to hide the fact they're using it because they're scared of the public backlash.
Or they're very proudly using it to fire all their artists and just replace them with generated slop to save a few bucks.
Right. The motivation is either shame or greed. But Bald and Bonkers seems to be taking a third path here.
They view AI as a fundamental transformative tool. That's the quote. They aren't fighting the tide. They are grabbing a surfboard. But the absolute #1 mandate is radical transparency.
I love that phrase, radical transparency. What does that actually look like in practice, though?
The policy is incredibly explicit about this. They must disclose when AI is used, where it is used, and how it is used.
But why go to all that trouble? I mean, look, if I use spell check, I don't put a disclaimer at the bottom of my email saying, spell check was used in the creation of this message. Why does AI need a big warning label?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The document argues that it's about fostering trust, but I think it's deeper than that. It's about navigating the uncanny valley of modern content. And we've all read an article or heard a script that just felt slightly off, a little bit soulless, plastic.
Yeah, the chat GPT voice, you can spot it a mile away.
You can. And by disclosing their AI use up front, they are effectively saying to the audience, we aren't trying to trick you into thinking a human did all of this grunt work.
Yeah.
We are respecting your intelligence enough to show you our process.
Yeah.
They are trying to set a new industry standard.
Let's get into the specifics, because this is where I think it gets really interesting. They list the tools they use. For Deep Dive AI, the show we're sort of modeling here, they specifically mention using Google's Notebook LM. Okay, for the listener who hasn't used that, how is that different from me just going to ChatGPT and saying, write me a script about this topic?
Oh, it's a massive difference, a fundamental difference. Your standard LLMs, your large language models like ChatGPT or the base version of Claude, they are prone to what we call hallucinations.
They just make stuff up.
They make stuff up with incredible confidence. They're designed to predict the next logical word, not necessarily the true word. They are, as you said in the outline, creative liars.
Right.
Notebook LM is different because it uses something called REACH technology. That's retrieval augmented generation. In simple terms, you feed it your own specific source documents, your PDFs, your notes, your transcripts, and the AI is constrained to only answer questions based on those documents you provided. It grounds the AI in your reality.
So it's not improvising from the whole internet, it's summarizing the facts that you personally gave it.
Exactly. And by specifying Notebook LM in their public policy, bold and bonkers is signaling that they care deeply about accuracy. They aren't using AI to generate fiction. They're using it to rapidly synthesize their own data. That's a crucial distinction for a network that produces investigative nonfiction.
That makes a ton of sense. They're using the robot as a hyper-efficient research assistant, not as a novelist.
Precisely. A librarian, not a storyteller.
Okay, what about the visual side? They mention creating original visuals to avoid generic stock content. I actually laughed out loud at this because I know exactly the pain they're talking about.
Oh, it's real?
You're making a video, you need a picture of a ghost in a library, and every single stock photo available is some cheesy guy in a white sheet.
Chuckles. Right. But look at the business logic they cite there. They specifically mention rapid A/B testing. This is sophisticated digital marketing.
Oh.
Well, instead of paying a human graphic designer for 2 weeks to create one perfect thumbnail for a video, they can use an image generator to create 50 variations in an hour. They can then test all 50 to see which one gets the most clicks, and then maybe have a human come in and refine the winner. It's pure efficiency.
And it bypasses the stock photo problem entirely.
Completely. And then there's the sonic application, the music generation. The source notes that this is primarily to avoid licensing issues.
This is a huge strategic advantage. I mean, if you run a YouTube channel, copyright strikes are the stuff of nightmares.
They can kill you.
They can. You can lose your entire channel, your entire livelihood, because of 3 seconds of a background song you didn't even know was there.
By using AI to compose and arrange their own unique soundtracks, they completely bypass that legal minefield. They own the sound. It's clean. No strings attached.
But the one that really surprised me was the financial application. They say they use AI for anomaly detection and predictive forecasting.
Synth, when do podcast networks run predictive financial algorithms on their own books?
Exactly. That sounds like something a Wall Street firm would do, not a company that makes shows about Bigfoot.
It speaks directly to that level of sophistication we mentioned at the top. Look, the creator economy is incredibly volatile. Ad rates can crash overnight. A platform's algorithm can change and wipe out your traffic.
It's unstable.
Very. And humans are generally bad at spotting those slow-moving disasters in a spreadsheet. AI is excellent at it. By using AI for anomaly detection, they're basically building an automated CFO that never sleeps. It's a financial early warning system.
So the robot protects the money so the humans can be free to make the weird art.
That is the symbiotic relationship they're clearly aiming for. And they aren't just hoarding these tools for themselves. The policy explicitly mentions a mission to democratize this technology. They are teaching AI in that network academy we talked about.
It's that limitless ideation sandbox idea. It genuinely levels the playing field. If you're a creator on a shoestring budget, you can't afford to hire a graphic designer, a composer, and a data analyst.
No way.
But with these tools and the training that the network provides, you can effectively simulate that entire team.
It lowers the barrier to entry almost to zero. But, and I have to stress this, the document always pairs this power with the absolute requirement of disclosure.
No.
It is like ethical accelerationism.
I like that.
Go fast, use the most powerful tools available, but never, ever lie about it.
Ethical accelerationism. Okay, so we have the machines all figured out. Now let's circle back to the meat bags, the humans. Section 3 covers employee conduct, safety, and that very ominous-sounding blacklist.
That's right, the human element. Even in a bonkers world, it still requires a lot of structure. The code of conduct is mostly what you might expect, professionalism, diligence, but there is a very specific note about social media.
The views are my own clause.
Yes. You must clarify that your personal opinions are not the company's official stance.
That's pretty standard corporate speak, isn't it?
It is, but in a creative network where the personalities are the brand, that line gets incredibly blurry, If a host goes on a wild rant on Twitter, does that reflect on the entire network? This policy attempts to draw a very hard, clear line in the sand.
And the dress code, I thought this was funny. Personal expression is encouraged, but safety is paramount. I'm just picturing someone showing up to a paranormal investigation in a giant flammable cosplay suit.
Given the nature of their content film shoots, urban exploration, that is probably not an unlikely scenario. But let's look at the workplace relationships policy. This is often a very sticky, difficult area for companies to navigate.
Yeah, usually it's either a total free-for-all, don't ask, don't tell, or it's strictly forbidden, no dating allowed.
Bold and Bonkers takes what I see as a very pragmatic, very modern approach. They say consensual relationships are fine. They don't ban dating. They explicitly recognize that creative people often bond over their shared work.
Unless, there's always an unless.
Unless there's a direct reporting structure involved. If a supervisor and a subordinate begin a romantic relationship, immediate disclosure to HR is mandatory.
Okay, and what happens then? Does somebody get fired?
No. And I found this really refreshing. The rule clearly states that reassignment is the first step, not firing. They try to eliminate the conflict of interest without just destroying one of the employees' livelihoods.
That's that sanctuary vibe coming through again, isn't it? They want to keep you in the tribe if they possibly can. But sometimes you gotta get kicked out of the tribe.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Let's talk about the Bald and Bonkers blacklist.
This is a heavy section. I'll be honest, when I first read that title, my first thought was, is this even legal? Blacklists have such a nasty, ugly history in Hollywood.
Right, the McCarthy era, the Red Scare.
Exactly. But the document is very careful in how it describes this. It's a confidential, third-party, managed watch list. And that third-party part is absolutely critical.
Why? What does that do?
Because it prevents the list from becoming a tool for petty personal grievances. If the boss is just mad at you one day, he can't just put your name on the list. An external neutral entity manages the criteria and the evidence. It adds a layer of due process to the act of banning someone.
And they stress that it is preventative, not punitive. They aren't doing it to punish you. They claim they were doing it to keep the rest of the community safe.
Right.
So what gets you on this list?
The list of offenses is very telling about their company culture. You have the obvious ones. Malicious intent, harassment, scam-like behaviors, standard stuff. But then there's this one. Ego-based narcissistic tendencies.
Wow.
And they define that as prioritizing self over the collective good.
That is. It's vague, but it's also incredibly specific. We've all worked with that person. The energy vampire in the office, the person with main character syndrome. Usually you just have to suffer through it. Here, it's grounds for being completely blacklisted from the entire network.
It suggests that they place a much higher premium on overall community health than they do on individual talent. You could be the most talented creator in the world, but if you are toxic to the team, if your ego consistently disrupts the collective, you're out.
It also lists propagation of damaging gossip. They really, really want to kill the drama before it can even start.
Yes.
But here's the twist, and this is what makes it so different from historical blacklists. It isn't necessarily a life sentence.
No, it isn't. And this is incredibly rare in corporate policies of any kind. There is a clearly defined reconciliation path.
A redemption arc. They wrote a redemption arc into their HR policy.
They literally did. The document outlines the specific steps for removal from the list. First, you have to acknowledge the harm you caused. No excuses.
Tip 1.
Step 2, you have to demonstrate sustained change. And they actually suggest things like therapy as a tangible way to show you're working on yourself.
And then
you have to commit to making a positive contribution to the community you harmed.
it's like a criminal justice system that actually believes in rehabilitation. It's wild.
It aligns perfectly with that game night recovery theme we discussed earlier. The core philosophy of the company seems to be that people can make mistakes and people can get better.
So it creates that sanctuary environment by rigorously filtering out toxic elements, but it doesn't just dehumanize the people who made the mistakes. It offers them a map to get back.
It strikes me as a very, very difficult thing to manage in practice, though. How do you assess sustained change? That's so subjective.
It is, but I guess the alternative is a zero-tolerance culture where one mistake can end your career forever. They're trying to find that difficult middle ground.
It seems so.
Okay, so we've established a safe internal culture, but this network has to operate in the real world, which is, let's just say, it's polarized. Which brings us to Section 4, political neutrality.
And this is a strict mandate. The policy says absolute neutrality. No endorsements of political parties, candidates, or specific ideologies.
All right, I have to push back on this a little bit. In 2026, is that even possible? Everything feels political now.
It does.
If you talk about the environment, it's political. If you talk about public education, it's political. Can a media company that deals with real-world stories actually be neutral?
It is incredibly difficult. But their stated rationale is that they want to create a safe space for all creators to tell their stories. If the network itself takes a hard partisan side, it automatically alienates half the potential storytellers out there. It creates an echo chamber. They want the bonkers stories from everyone, not just from one side of the aisle.
But they do carve out a fascinating sole exception. They seem to have realized that total absolute neutrality is impossible, so they created a very specific loophole.
The humanitarian advocacy exception.
Right. They say advocacy is permitted, but only for a specific list of universal causes. Let's look at the list. Suicide prevention, animal abuse prevention, domestic violence awareness, and human trafficking prevention.
Now look at that list critically. Why those 4 issues?
Well, they're just universally bad things, right?
Exactly. Who is the organized constituency for animal abuse? Who is out there lobbying in favor of human trafficking? No one. These are what you call safe moral stances. They are treated, in the document's words, as issue-focused, not candidate-focused.
So you can run a campaign that says stop domestic violence, but you cannot run one that says vote for Senator Smith because he supports the Violence Against Women Act.
That is the distinction perfectly. It allows them to have a clear moral compass to show that they care about human suffering without getting dragged into the partisan mud wrestling of day-to-day electoral politics. It's a very, very careful threading of a very small needle.
Now, speaking of threading needles, we have to address the policy on digital sex work. This jumped out at me because usually corporate policies either ignore this topic completely or they just ban it outright. Bald and Bonkers has a whole section dedicated to it.
And it is a surprisingly business-oriented section. The policy describes its official stance as neutral, informed, and non-judgmental.
They explicitly recognize digital sex work as a complex small business, not as a moral failing, but as a business.
This is the key insight. You have to think about the financial reality for many online creators today. They might have a Patreon for their public-facing art and an OnlyFans for their adult content. Banks and payment processors often debank these people. They just shut down their accounts because they're deemed high risk.
Right. It's a huge, huge issue in the gig economy.
Bald and Bonkers is stepping in and saying, we see the skills that are involved here. They actually list them in the policy. Financial management, platform mastery, CRM, lighting, videography. They are validating the labor.
They're basically saying, hey, if you can run a successful adult content page, you're an entrepreneur and you have a set of transferable skills that we recognize.
Which is an objective fact. But very few companies are willing to admit it out loud. They state clearly that BBN will not discriminate against employees or creators for their legal, consensual adult work.
But there are conditions. It's not just a free-for-all.
Oh, very strict ones. It must be 18 plus A. There must be documented enthusiastic consent from all parties. And it must be legal in the jurisdictions where it's created and consumed. But as long as those boxes are checked, your night job won't get you fired from your day job at the network.
It reflects a very modern audience focus. They know that the creator economy inevitably intersects with the adult industry. Pretending it doesn't is just sticking your head in the sand.
It connects right back to that core principle of absolute authenticity. The policy is essentially, we know this exists, so let's have a clear, transparent policy for it instead of just whispering about it in the hallways.
Okay, so we've seen the what the channels, the AI, the rules of conduct. Now we need the why, and Section 5 is all about that, about operational transparency.
And the document itself is structured on a principle they call the two-part communication approach. It's policy first, rationale second.
For every single rule.
For every rule. They want the why to be just as clear as the what. They don't just want you to follow the rule. They want you to understand the logic behind it, to buy into the reasoning.
And a big part of that logic is about economic support for creators. I saw a mention of a creative capital pool. What is that?
This is massive. Think of it as a mini venture capital fund for weirdos.
VC for weirdos.
Yeah.
That should be on a t-shirt.
It absolutely should be. But that's essentially what it is. The company allocates a portion of its resources for seed capital. If you're an independent creator with a project that aligns with their values, maybe a new investigative podcast series or a documentary, they have a dedicated pot of money to help you get it off the ground.
That is really putting their money where their mouth is. It's not just, we support you with empty words and exposure. It's, here is some actual cash to buy a better microphone and editing software.
And they couple that with their affiliate marketing policy, which is also very ethical. They only promote products and services that they have personally vetted and trust. But I think the most bonkers, in a good way, support mechanism is their partnership with the Internet Archive.
Oh, right. I love the Internet Archive. The Wayback Machine people. What's the deal there?
They've set up a system to provide free access to the archive's vast library of sound effects, public domain music, and public domain books, specifically to lower the barriers to entry for creators who don't have a lot of money.
Why does a for-profit LLC care about helping poor creators? What's the business case?
Because talent is distributed equally across the population, but opportunity is not. If you can't afford the fancy AI tools we just talked about, or you can't afford a subscription to Adobe Creative Cloud, Bald and Bonkers points you to this huge, free library of assets.
It ensures that a simple lack of funds isn't the thing that stops a great story from being told.
Exactly. It creates a pipeline of new talent that might otherwise be completely lost to the world. It is democratizing storytelling in action.
But then, right at the end of this very forward-thinking, creator-friendly document, there's this section on law enforcement cooperation. And it feels surprisingly hardline, almost out of place.
It does feel that way at first glance. The wording is absolute, transparent, and unhindered assistance to law enforcement. Employees are explicitly forbidden from shielding information or obstructing justice if legal documents, like a warrant, are served.
Wait a minute, isn't that a bit bootlicky? For a punk rock network that champions the unconventional, you'd almost expect a bit of a fight the power, protect your sources, anti-establishment vibe, right?
I completely understand that reaction. But you have to think about the kind of content they produce. They deal with the paranormal. They deal with conspiracy theories. They deal with bonkers stories from the absolute edges of reality.
What does that have to do with it?
If you are already operating on the fringe, the last thing you can afford is to look like a criminal enterprise yourself. You fall into what's called a legitimacy trap. If this network were ever seen as shielding actual criminals or obstructing a legitimate investigation, the whole platform would be discredited and probably shut down overnight.
Ah, I see. So the squeaky clean, by-the-book compliance with the law is actually the shield that protects their ability to be weird.
It's exactly that. Compliance buys them the freedom to be bonkers. If the corporate books are in perfect order and the police have no reason to ever raid their office, then the creators inside that office are completely free to explore whatever ghost stories or UFO sightings they want.
That's the core takeaway, isn't it? That phrase we started with. Compliance buys freedom.
Precisely. They've built this incredibly rigid fortress of rules so that the people living inside it can play safely and freely.
So let's try to synthesize this whole deep dive. We started with this central paradox. The name Bald and Bonkers versus this serious, almost constitution-like policy document.
And we saw how they've systematically built themselves up from a simple YouTube channel into a truly diversified media corporation with books, an educational academy, and a future TV network on the roadmap.
We went deep into that AI policy, the mandate of radical transparency, the specific use of tools like Notebook LM for accuracy, not fiction, the use of financial algorithms for, corporate safety.
We explored the human element, that incredible blacklist that is designed to protect the community but still offers a path to redemption. The game night channel that publicly turns a personal struggle into a tool for healing.
And the really fine line they walk with their strict political neutrality on one hand and their surprisingly progressive acceptance of digital sex work as a legitimate business on the other. It's a very specific, very modern mix of values.
It is. The whole thing is a grand experiment to professionalize the weird. They use intense structure blacklists, AI disclosure, legal compliance to protect the chaotic, beautiful freedom of creativity.
I just keep coming back to that game night channel. It's such a tiny detail in this massive, sprawling document, but it says so much about the whole enterprise. The personal bleeds directly into the professional. The company isn't just a cold machine. It's a living extension of the people running it, flaws and all.
And for me, the AI policy is the blueprint. It really is. If every media company, every content creator adopted that simple, radical transparency approach, just admitting that AI is a tool, not a human replacement, and educating their users on how and why it's being used, we would be in a much, much better place culturally.
So here's the thought I want to leave you with for everyone listening. We live in this world of curated online personas, right? Where everyone is desperately trying to present a perfect, polished image of themselves.
Hmm.
And here's a company that literally calls itself bonkers, publicly admits its founder needs a timer to stop playing video games, and formally acknowledges that its creators might have OnlyFans accounts.
And yet they have more rules and procedures than a bank.
Exactly. So the final question is this. Can a company truly enforce absolute authenticity through a corporate policy document? Or is the structure itself, the rules, the boundaries, the safety net, the very thing that makes that authenticity possible in the first place? Do we actually need walls to be truly free within them?
That is a question worth pondering for a long time.
I think so too. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the Bald and Bonkers manual. It was surprisingly deep.
And entirely fascinating.
See you on the next deep dive.